Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Well, a hearing was scheduled and heard yesterday related to the lawsuit filed by Mamie Mitchell, the script supervisor on the Alec Baldwin film Rust. Mamie Mitchell was standing beside Rust cinematographer Helena Hutchins when she was fatally shot, and the director Joel Souza. He was seriously injured by the same bullet. Because Baldwin was never required to actually fire the weapon during the rehearsal, something the script supervisor of all people would know, Mitchell is suing for quote-unquote extensive negligence. Before we get to the rest of this episode, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So, Judge Michael E. Whitaker has allowed the hearing to be rescheduled to the end of next month on September 28. Mitchell has been given an opportunity to amend her complaint during this time as well. Now, although it's not necessarily new news, the Superior Court in Los Angeles has given Mitchell the green light to seek punitive damages, despite efforts from some of the producers to have the request for damages stricken. According to Deadline, quote, "For pleading purposes, the court finds the first amended complaint alleges facts sufficient to establish despicable conduct carried out by moving defendants with a willful and conscious disregard of the rights or safety of others." That's according to a written statement from the judge. Whitaker also noted that Mitchell's lawyers alleged the four defendants intentionally undertook a low-budget and cost-cutting scheme that was known to create unsafe conditions for movie production crews that resulted in moving defendants' failure to ensure basic safety protocols with respect to the hazardous use of firearms, end quote. Now, I think a sticking point with a lot of people is this idea that, hey, it was a low-budget film, what did you expect? It was a low-budget film and there was cost-cutting going on. Well, that's obviously what is going on here. But I think one's got to think about how low-budget it was and whether it was too low-budget, and if there was rushing to meet deadlines, whether there was too much rushing to meet deadlines, whether there was too much cost-cutting. In other words, it was excessively low-budget, excessively cost-cutting, and thus excessively reckless. Does that make sense? And so obviously one needs to consider what these generic statements actually mean in practice. And I have dealt exhaustively with Baldwin's own statements, that's fairly recently, and also with the questionable hiring, not only of Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, but also using her both as an armorer and for props. As a result, the inexperienced Hannah was rushed, and this may well have led to serious mistakes. The failure to impose basic safety protocols, such as not pointing the weapon at a crew member and having the right person hand over the weapon, is, I think, quite obvious by now. In this case, there are initial claims that Hannah, the armorer, handed Baldwin the gun, followed by claims that the first assistant director, that's Dave Halls, that he handed over the gun directly to Baldwin. Now, going back to Deadline, quote, "In their court papers, Mitchell's attorneys alleged the producers intentionally failed to hire experienced crew members to manage and handle the numerous weapons that were to be used in the film," end quote. Now, I think one can also draw an analogy between a sort of a conventional low-budget film and a low-budget cowboy film where there's a heck of a lot of firearms on set, far more than in a normal movie. And there one's got to ask, do you also go low-budget with your armorer? Do you also have your armorer in a plural role, a double role, as the props person as well? And then on top of that, do you also have a very young, very inexperienced armorer? So where Mitchell's attorneys have alleged that the producers, quote-unquote, intentionally failed, I find it quite hard to argue with that, or with the idea that there were accidental discharges leading up to the fatal incident in the church, which, as I've been saying all along, it makes it feel less like an accident than something that was inevitably about to unfold. The timing of the walkout of the camera crew over concerns about safety that very morning, the morning of the incident, having already communicated their concerns, shouldn't be seen as pure coincidence either. Meanwhile, in recent days, Baldwin's wife has posted counter PR about quote-unquote enemies trying to destroy her husband. There's perhaps a little substance to that claim of late. Fox News has recently brought out a documentary, Who is Alec Baldwin? Now, according to the New York Post, quote, the Federalist reporter Emily Jashinsky said that Baldwin and Basinger, that's his former wife, were bashed in the press at the time when their first movie came out for reportedly being very difficult to work with. So if that is true, and if that was the case right in the beginning, was that also the case on Rust? And what is the reality of someone who's basically in charge of production who's difficult? What sort of effect does that have on the people around them? Something else to bear in mind is the investigation into the Rust incident. The official police investigation has still not been finalized. Can you believe it? And so going back to the New York Post, quote, this is a reference to Alec Baldwin, quote, he has zero self-regulation and zero emotional self-control and zero capacity to care for the thoughts and feelings of other people. That's according to celebrity life coach Max Victor. That's heard talking about the incident. Now, I'm not sure I agree with that. I'm not sure whether there was zero, but I think there's maybe is a question around, was there enough empathy? Was there enough compassion? Was there enough sense of being reasonable on this particular set? I do think it is quite difficult for celebrities who are actors to spend any length of time in the real world when their job is to not be in the real world. Whatever you may think of these assertions, they come at a damaging time for the actor prior to the hearing of his first lawsuit. Several more lawsuits, meanwhile, are waiting in the wings. So I'm not going to take it further than that. For those who are interested in my series on Elvis Presley, the next episode is likely to be on Saturday, dealing with the most important men in Elvis Presley's life, but in particular one man, and why that man was singularly and so significantly such an important figure, a father figure in Elvis's life. And one's also got to apply the same psychology in the Rust incident to Elvis's life. Wasn't that also an accident waiting to happen? And when you have an accident that is waiting to happen, isn't there a duty of care to someone who's in a position of some authority, some kind of management position, to intervene? If they don't, aren't they responsible in some way? Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.